This is my brutally honest review of The Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature expansion pack. This is a part of a series where I brutally honestly review every single pack for The Sims 4, including all of the older ones, unsponsored, unaffiliated with EA. The Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature pack, according to EA, is about living life among the trees with the fairest folk, having a balanced lifestyle in a land of enchantment. Basically, Simmers wanted fairies, but they wanted to justify upselling this as an expansion pack, so call this pack maybe instead Enchanted by Bloat, just like me after an IBS flare-up. Taking a look at Create a Sim mode, so the only difference between human Sims and fairy Sims is that obviously fairies have wings, and I think there's a lot of customization for the wings. This includes a paint mode as well as different color presets to apply to the different wing types and shapes, and I think there's a lot of them. Fairies also get new eye style, skin tones and ears. It's all fine. I'm not personally jizzing myself over it, but I think the customization options are nice. In terms of the clothing, some of it is like fairy stuff, but then other stuff is like normal human stuff, and it's a bit of a mishmash. And when I first saw it, I thought like, oh my god, there's actually not that much stuff here. It feels kind of like a game pack's worth of cast. Like, did they blow the entire budget on the wings? And it's not just the amount of stuff, it's the designs. I know that's really horrible to say, but a lot of it looks very base game. It's got that like tacky, you know, like those older packs like Get to Work or Get Together or something. Like, it's got that tacky vibe about it. That's for the human stuff and the fairy stuff. Like, there's a pair of trousers which has like a bow on like a string on it, and it's just like painted on. It's so tacky. And if the feminine stuff is bad, you can always count on the masculine stuff being even worse. Although in this instance, it actually seemed like male Sims got slightly more like fairy designs in terms of variety, although it was still pretty abysmal. Weirdly, I don't think there was enough fairy stuff. I felt like you can't really make a unique looking fairy. All of your fairy Sims are going to be dressing exactly the same as each other because there's such a huge lack of fairy clothing, and the normal human Sim looking clothing that's there is also just pretty crap looking, so you won't end up using it anyway. I wish the Sims team didn't bother adding in the mediocre looking human cast and instead just added a lot more fairy stuff, because you will definitely need to use custom content to make up the difference here. There is a huge gap. Unless they're planning on releasing My First Fairy stuff at some point soon, it wouldn't surprise me. In cast, you can choose one of 3 new traits for gameplay. There's Disruptive, Mystical, and Plant Lover. Do they have an impact on gameplay? Not really. They unlock some kind of interactions and they may have a small impact on the game, but not enough to really notice them existing, being honest. I also found the Plant Lover one was a bit annoying because your Sim would constantly get tense if they weren't speaking with the plants constantly. It was kind of annoying. So I personally would say the traits are a miss from me. But going back to the outfits, I can confidently say the Sims team had no idea what they were doing, and it showed. I really didn't like the cast here. It was so mediocre. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. Taking a look at build mode, on the contrary, it's actually quite good here. I think most of you are not going to enjoy this stuff here because it's very magical looking. I know you guys listen to Taylor Swift whilst you're building your basic bitch American suburban homes in Willow Creek, so this pack is definitely not going to be for you in terms of build mode, but still, I actually think it's fantastic. They actually went all out with like the supernaturally stuff. It looks very fairy-like, and at first I thought, is it just going to be a rehash of cottage living? But it actually felt very different to cottage living. The most important thing I always look for is there enough stuff to actually build a whole entire house? Because the last thing you want with a pack like this is to have an enchanting fairy bedroom and fairy kitchen, fairy living room, but a mid-century modern ensuite bathroom. Do you know what I mean? The first thing I noticed was a lack of a single bed for literally no reason. But here's the thing about fairies in The Sims 4, they don't actually have a hunger need or a bladder need. Honestly, I don't think fairies even need a house, and in this pack the whole point is like living off the land, so do you really need a whole house's worth of stuff? I personally don't think so. I think this pack came with enough to make yourself a cute little fairy cottage for sure, and definitely enough for every single room of the house, but it's definitely like a bringing the outdoors indoors vibe with the build stuff. The architecture was really nice, really unique, like the windows and doors and stuff too. As I said, I think it pairs well with cottage cottage living, but it definitely feels like its own separate thing. Honestly, recent Sims 4 packs to me have felt either very lazy with build mode, like just adding loads of random 2D textured objects like wall art instead of like proper objects, or they just don't have a coherent style or enough stuff to make an actual build. This is one of the first times in a while I actually felt like they put a lot of effort in making sure that there was enough to do a whole build, and I think everything pairs together really, really well. There is definitely an issue with object categorization. Some items are actually missing from build mode unless you go down a rabbit hole of searching through different categories. The Sims team have been really, really bad for this lately with both CAS and build mode for packs, like base game updates. I don't know what they're doing, but for some reason objects just keep going missing and it's really annoying. Also, there is no vegetation in this. There are like plants that you can place on the wall, but they're technically wall decorations. Like if you're building a mystical looking house, do you not want to have magical looking vegetation that goes around the house? Like what about pretty magical looking trees and things? They just don't exist, and it didn't make any sense as to why they didn't exist, and that was annoying. In general though, I thought build mode was really, really pretty, and I think they basically got it. So I'm actually going to give it a 9 out of 10 for build mode. I really liked it. So looking at the world, there are 14 lots between 3 neighborhoods. I think it's called Innis Green or something. There's like a little town area that's full of gnomes. There's a countryside area that's just a filler area. And then we've got the fairy area. Let's be honest, this is the only area you guys want to visit. Honestly, it's not as magical as I thought it would look. I expected to see glitter, smoke, glowing things. You know, the kind of things you expect to see on the floor of a gay nightclub by the end of the night. Instead, it just looked very normal and not very magical. I was quite disappointed. There's like a fairy town hall kind of building, which is a rabbit hole where you can relieve your needs in, but that's pretty much it. And as I said, there are 2 other neighborhoods. One of them is just grassy, and I thought, oh, what's going on here? Basically nothing. And then there's the towny area again. What's a real building here? What's a rabbit hole? What's fake? Who knows? The world comes with multiple different shops, like a fish shop, a grocer's, a bookshop. That's lovely, okay. But we can buy all of these things through the PC, or you can just buy books from the bookshelf. So what's actually the point? The Sims 4 base game was not built for having shops in mind, whether that be a rabbit hole or a real shop. So I personally think that they are a waste of space. The pack definitely seems to very heavily encourage living off the land, or at least buying things that you need from the grocery store instead of actually buying it from your fridge, which is funny because the simple living lot challenge is actually tied to the cottage living expansion pack. So it kind of renders all these shops in the world pretty pointless, unless you of course already own the other pack. Despite this being called Enchanted by Nature, I didn't find the world that enchanting. The townies in the world don't have any relationships with each other. They don't have any stories to tell. There's some fake lore in the game about gnomes and fairies, but it has no real impact on gameplay. Adding a text box with a fictional paragraph is not lore. It's just somebody at the office got bored one day and they didn't want to do their real job, so they decided to procrastinate and write up these made-up stories to avoid doing their real job. Just like most of the grinder profiles I come across, everything here is fake. There is barely anything to do except click on some random objects and be rewarded with a notification and a description of fake lore that somebody made up whilst they were procrastinating. I thought the Life and Death expansion pack resolved boring worlds by adding more stuff to do in them and things to discover as you play through. This pack just felt like a huge step back. All we have is more set dressing, fake shops that you don't need, more fucking bars and museums as if we need any more of those. There is a side quest mechanic called Fables, which are just like fetch quests, but I didn't think they were very coherent. Like the same quests can appear over and over again, so it lacked any kind of interesting story or meaning behind them or any kind of overarching storyline. I can categorically say I had absolutely no fun exploring what this pack does not have to offer in its world. Despite being marketed as a pack about living off the land, there is nothing to do in the vast empty land other than find a pond that you can wash yourself in or bathe in. I just don't understand the point. The world is so bad, just as bad as most other worlds. But what makes this world even worse is that exploring the world was basically the whole point of the pack concept. Inner screen is pretty crap. I'm giving it a 2 out of 10. So taking a look at the gameplay of The Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature, just like all of my exes, Sims 4 Fairies feed off other people's emotions. Instead of having a hunger need, they have an emotional force need. So if emotions weren't volatile and turbulent enough in The Sims 4, they certainly are now, because your fairies' emotions and their mootlets will be changing constantly. So again, just like all of my exes, Sims 4 Fairies will be having constant mood swings. And this is thanks to all the different types of emotions that they absorb for food. Although you can just sleep inside of a fairy house to restore your emotional force need, which is a lot easier and more effective. So it kind of renders the whole emotion thing pointless. So it feels like maybe an oversight there that they just made it too easy. So continuing on with innuendos, I would like to talk about penises. That's right, fairies are growers, or just like me on a cold winter morning, a shrinker. Fairies can size down, and also like penises, they can fit into very, very tight holes. Unfortunately, I don't know what that feels like anymore. Fairies can have house parties and bathe and basically do anything in this miniature fairy house. They can do other random things like sleeping on a piano when they shrink down as well. I actually tested fairy interactions with a load of objects from the base game and other packs, and to be honest, there really wasn't anything like, okay, my fairy can size down into a rabbit hole fairy house, sleep on a piano, splash in the kitchen sink, but that's honestly it. You can have fairies shrink and technically play inside of any objects where they basically disappear and the object shakes, kind of like how ghosts possess objects and they make it shake. Rather hilariously, when I make my fairy shrink and play on the treadmill, nothing actually happened. Your plum bob rather awkwardly teleports above the treadmill and it's it's just totally stationary. Nothing's happening. It's so lazy. It's exactly the same with the chest press. At least when you shrink and play in a trash can, it bloody moves. The shrink and play thing just felt lazy to me, and it just felt like a rehash of ghosts being able to possess an object. I just feel like they could have done more other than just have your fairy shrink and sleep or shrink and shake. As with everything in The Sims 4, fairies have a skill tree system. Honestly, a lot of the skills felt really unnecessary and the descriptions of each power were actually quite confusing. And I know you're going to say, Satch, did you even spend time bothering to read them, bothering trying to work out what they do, bothering trying to play them? Yes, I did. And I still didn't get a lot of them. Even if I understood what they did, I thought, why am I going to even bother using this? The plant growing skills and the mischievous skills I thought made sense and were good fun. But there was a skill category called customization, and it came with some very confusing effects that just didn't really make sense to me. There's also an emotion category, and this was just about influencing the emotions of other Sims. But like Sims 4 emotions are so volatile anyway, like what was the point? I just felt like they could have done a better job with fairy powers, being honest. I got the impression that the Sims team were maybe feeling a little bit inspired when they were trying to come up with fairy power ideas. Perhaps more powers in manipulating their natural elements would have been really good. Also a greater ability to manipulate their environment, like with weather, for example, or unlocking more interactions when you've sized down with new abilities. They could have even looked at the Spinning Plum Bob's Fairies mod, which, by the way, I still think is totally valid because that one comes with a ton of fairy powers. But I'll be honest, I just didn't enjoy using the fairy powers much. I found them boring. In order to gain experience points, by the way, to raise up the ranks as a fairy and gain skill points, you basically just have to spam the instantly fly here interaction over and over again. It's literally the best and fastest way. And I just want to say that fairies are their own whole expansion pack, other than the other occults that are actually game packs. And in order to make leveling feel rewarding, just as constructive criticism, I just feel like they should have tried harder. Like, how about giving you special in-game tasks in order to raise through the ranks that you can't rank up unless you complete a certain task or mission for the fairies, or completing certain side quests? I don't know, anything than just spamming instantly fly here over and over again. It just feels too easy and stupid. When you do reach a certain rank as a fairy, the game forces you to choose to either be a good fairy or a bad fairy. And I thought, oh, that sounds really exciting. But then I just realized it's basically forcing you to choose from one aspiration or the other. There are 5 aspirations in this pack. You first get a fairy one, like becoming a fairy, then that splits up into the good fairy and bad fairy one, but they weren't that exciting. Fairies are okay. EA definitely did not push the boat out to make fairies extraordinary, despite the extraordinary cost of having them in your game. They felt like a nice addition, and I think they were fun to mess around with, but I just didn't feel like the fairy experience was all there. I thought the powers were just a little bit mediocre and mostly boring. The fairy customization, it just doesn't feel good enough with the lack of cast. I just wasn't impressed that much with fairies, and I felt disappointed. Plant Sims also get a very tiny update in this pack. Do you want another penis innuendo, or should we stop? Doesn't matter if you're small, just saying. You could just be a bottom. Anyway, the Plant Sims update is so small and minor, and fairies can actually fill the needs of Plant Sim, by the way, and it's very easy now to get hold of the magic beans that turn you into a Plant Sim. But they're just the same old boring Plant Sims, and I just didn't really enjoy playing as one, being honest. It's not like in the Sims 2, where they actually felt kind of cool. It's not like the Plant Sims mods, so it's more so just seeing other townies around you in the fairy world that look like plants, which is cool. So there's a brand new job in this pack called the Naturopath Career, Nature Path Career. So because this is technically not a fairies pack, it's an Enchanted by Nature pack, this is a brand new natural doctor career. You're a homeopathic doctor, and in this pack, Sims can be cast with ailments, different kinds of illnesses that are magical and quirky, like vomiting up money, for example, or like getting stalked by gnomes or something. So with the career, you use a brand new apothecary skill to grind up some herbs and make some homeopathic potions to cure these ailments. And the career is actually very, very unique because it's a normal career like a rabbit hole, but it also has work from home tasks. But you also can do it as like a live career, but it's a live career from home. There's no special lot type like can get to work. I did think the live career elements from this job were very boring. One sim, literally just one, will come to your house and you've just got to repeat interactions over and over again, trying to ascertain what's wrong with the sim. And once you've figured it out, you then craft the like cure, and then you give them the cure, and then your workday ends, and that's it. It just didn't feel like the most satisfying career in the world. I think it would be more fun just to leave it as a rabbit hole career. And unfortunately, the apothecary craftables, they don't actually sell for that much money, so you couldn't set up a market stall, you couldn't set up a retail store with them all in, unfortunately. The apothecary thing isn't just crafting cures for the ailments. You can craft other random things like a potion, or like a drink that makes Sims wet themselves, or a potion that affects mootlets or fills occult needs. It just didn't really feel that special. I feel like they could have expanded on it a lot more. I just feel like, okay, apothecary is great, but what about other natural things that you can craft in the natural world? Do you know what I mean? What if this pack came with not just like gathering base game herbs, okay, instead of just gathering base game herbs and flowers, what about the ability to gather like vine leaves or something, or bits of bark, and actually creating some natural objects that you can put in your home, or creating natural clothing? I just feel like, seeing this is a whole thing about living off the land, I just didn't feel like there was much to do off the land, and I felt like apothecary wasn't enough, and I personally felt like there should have been more in terms of crafting and making things. This is a very weird loop where it's like ailments exist so that the apothecary table exists so that you can craft cures for the ailments that you administer with the brand new career, which is then used to cure the ailments. And it's just like a, you know, like a cycle, and it just feels like not a pyramid scheme. It just, do you know what I mean? It just feels like it exists for the sake of existing rather than for being for a fun player experience. It was more so just, okay, we've got to justify this being an expansion pack. What features are we going to add? And it felt like that was maybe the motivation behind putting these things in. I don't know. That's just my speculation. Also, like, the career getting promoted is a piece of piss. That means easy in British English. In fact, everything in this pack really is too easy. Although I would say that's more of an overarching problem with The Sims 4 in general. I mean, why bother foraging for new ingredients for the apothecary table when I can just buy them all from the apothecary table inventory instead? I just just didn't get it. Aside from the new apothecary skill, there's also a new natural living skill, and they've basically turned living off the land into its own special skill. And at first, Sims can sleep on the ground, they can also forage in the ground, and they can bathe in ponds. And then as you go through, you unlock more living off the land abilities. And honestly, throughout my Let's Play, I did not use my house once. As a fairy, you do not even need a house, and even as a human sim, you really don't need a house. It's more challenging, but you don't need a house with this brand new skill. I will admit, I do find it quite funny that EA decided to lock bathing in a pond behind this pack, and the foraging from the ground thing is taken straight from the werewolves pack, so it's not even brand new gameplay. Even like the animation looks pretty much the same. Even the whole living off the land concept is nothing new. EA are obviously trying to rinse the rags to riches trope for what it's worth, because clearly it's very popular. So this is just another one, and it probably won't be the last either. And even though you know this pack is cash grabby for doing that too, you're still going to buy it. Look me in the face and tell me you are not buying this pack so you can do your runaway teen Let's Play where this teen is foraging off the ground because this teen is homeless. In fact, your teen is probably going to be a goth, aren't they? Like, I can just read you like a fucking book. So you're buying this $39.99 expansion pack for just 2 interactions. Yes, you are. Don't lie to me. You let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. But hey, I didn't think natural living was like the biggest, most expansive thing in the world, but I thought it was a new way of approaching rags to riches, and it certainly makes it easier. The pack also comes with house plants and something called, I think they called it nature pressing. So house plants are just modular plants that you can place into one of, I think, 4 different pots, and you either water them or they die. The end. There's also nature pressing, which is pressing flowers into designs, although Sims actually do this instantly, like the flowers instantly appear in your Sims inventory. Is the most boring part of the pack, I would say. Sims can now also either be lucky or unlucky. How does this affect gameplay? I don't know, and I don't care. I did not think this was a cool feature when I saw it, so I didn't even bother to explore it. And did it have an impact on my game? I don't know, probably not. In addition to being lucky or not, Sims can either be balanced or imbalanced, not physically, but like mentally imbalanced, kind of like you, kind of like me. Again, what's being balanced or imbalanced? Honestly, I don't know. Again, I don't really care. It's just more bloatware to justify this being an expansion pack. It definitely didn't add anything to my game. It seems there's also a small update to gnomes. Gnomes now rather annoyingly bounce around constantly. You can also sprinkle gnomes with fairy dust in order to make them your bitch and do your cooking, cleaning. Well, not cooking. They can do your cleaning, repairing, gardening for you. Very cool. As I said before, there are 5 new aspirations. There's the fairy tutorial, which then splits into the tutorial for being a good fairy or the tutorial for being a bad fairy. There's also a tutorial for the natural living lifestyle. And there's also the 5th tutorial for the apothecary skill. Although the actual 2 aspirations, they genuinely felt a little bit different. Some were super easy, others were super hard. The traits were inconsistent in terms of what they did and their quality and their meaning. It's very evident each member of the Sims team has their own interpretation of what an aspiration actually is, and I think it would do them well to set some ground rules so that there's some real consistency with how the structure of an aspiration should be, what the purpose of it is, and also the traits. So I truly feel like the Sims team was scraping at the bottom of the barrel here, trying to desperately justify this pack existing. It felt more like a collection of random features to say, hey, this is just fairies, but we've added this, and this, so it's an expansion pack. I am honestly so worried about the future of The Sims. We are very clearly in the they have run out of ideas territory right now. My overall feelings towards the gameplay of Enchanted by Nature is that it feels like the features exist solely for the purpose of bloating the pack and justifying its existence, rather than actually including features that would just be good for a fun player experience. The ailments, the apothecary system, the associated career just doesn't feel that fun at all. Fairy powers feel like they exist in order to justify it at least having enough fairy powers rather than actually making them fun. Natural living didn't feel fun and didn't go far enough other than just foraging and sleeping. living. As a big occult fan, I'm literally dressed like a fucking fairy, guys. Like, I'm sweating my ass off in this polyester shit that I've got on my body right now. This is like the pack for me. I love the supernaturally packs. I love all of them. Is this one of the worst? No, that probably goes to vampires. Is it one of the best? Also no. I get the sense that they didn't really have enough direction with this pack in terms of trying to just focus on what can we actually do in order to make the core player experience fun, rather than what gameplay features can we code into this platform. It was, you know, do you guys see what I mean? It just felt like they were trying too hard to code in different features that could potentially be coded in the, you know, shitty Sims 4 platform that it is, in order to justify this being an EP rather than a game pack, rather than thinking, okay, what can we actually do just to make this a really fun experience that you can play with in the long term? It just feels like they didn't have any kind of player first direction at all. That's the impression I got with Fairies, with Natural Living, with the Apothecary skill, with everything. I felt like the gameplay was mediocre. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. So it's important to look at performance of Sims 4 packs that I do give them a rating. Not just looking at bugs, but also just like annoying oversights. So firstly, Natural Living and Apothecary traits have totally ruined the pie menu, because now every time you click on the ground or certain random things, you'll get all these pop-ups about, you know, do you want to forage here? And there's like 3 different forage interactions. It's giving like My Wedding Stories engagement interactions all over again. Another oversight is that Sims kept wearing their swimwear all the time in the fairy world. And I know it's not a bug. I think it's just an oversight. And I feel like all of the NPCs, the townies, should have been hard coded to have their everyday outfit the same as their swimwear to avoid this happening. In terms of actual bugs, sometimes the fairy wings didn't show up when they were supposed to. They just kind of retracted away and they just weren't there. Even though I like tried to activate them and keep them open, they wouldn't stay open. Can't say the same for some of your legs. Also, if you own Seasons, Natural Living is bugged right now. You see, you can't actually sleep on the ground outdoors if it's raining outside, unless you reach a high enough level in Natural Living, but unless you reach that level, you can't. The only problem is I had the pop-up notification saying your sim can't sleep outdoors right now because it's raining, but it wasn't actually raining. And when it was raining, I was able to sleep outdoors, even though my level wasn't high enough. So there was clearly a huge bug there going on with weather. Weather is so broken in The Sims 4 right now. So if you own Seasons, it does ruin this pack a bit. Some of the ailments felt a little bit buggy. The simoleon fever bug didn't work, for example. My sim wasn't actually coughing up money when they were supposed to. Also, another one of my sims had like the art ailment, and it didn't say in the ailment description that you weren't able to do art. It said your sim really wants to do art, like in the description. So I tried to make my sim do art, but they couldn't until I cured it. So I don't know what the hell went on there. I don't even know if that was a bug or if it's just the Sims team doing a bad job of like writing in the text box what the ailment actually did. I don't know. In general though, this experience was not actually that buggy compared to most other Sims 4 experiences. Granted, that's because this pack doesn't actually come with that much new stuff, doesn't come with that much new gameplay, so where can you go wrong really? So I'm giving the pack 8 out of 10 for its performance. In terms of cross-pack features, so there is a teleportation stone in the fairy world, and fairies can travel to special areas like the fairy grotto in the base game, but they can also travel to cross-pack ones like Sixam. By the way, you might be wondering if the Sylvan Glade, the fairy grotto, has been updated from the base game to add anything new in it. It hasn't, by the way, just to confirm. Of course not, this is Sims 4. I actually added every single occult and a dog into a household, and there weren't really any cross-pack interactions that I could find. Maybe there's a couple of cross-occult interactions with each other involving fairies. I just genuinely could not find any. They can raise the hydration need of mermaids and plant sims, that I did find. I did also see online, but actually didn't notice myself, that fairies can cure vampirism and they can take a werewolf out of fury mode. They can also help to fulfill the needs of animals, so the cottage living ones, horses and cats and dogs. Other than that though, I couldn't really find anything else with other occults. I was quite shocked actually. Oh, the apothecary table can make an occult potion. They can do that. Other than that though, there's not really that much. I definitely feel like cross-pack play was lacking in this EP. I'm not talking about like occults, by the way. I just mean like with natural living and things. The whole skill feels pretty pointless outside of the fairy world. I mean, it feels kind of pointless in the fairy world because they didn't have much natural living stuff, but it's actually quite hard to live and survive as as a fairy outside of the fairy neighborhood, let alone in the whole brand new world that comes with it. So I did feel like the crossplay wasn't great. It felt like a huge afterthought. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. My overall score of the Sims 4 Enchanted by Nature pack is a 5.7 out of 10. What the fuck? Even I'm shocked that I've scored this pack that low. I think the gameplay let me down a lot. I can let the create a sim slide because I can just download CC, that's fine. But the gameplay, it just didn't scratch an itch for me, I'm afraid. I've had grinder hookups more enchanting than this pack, and the grinder hookups were cheaper. So take from that what you will. And just to give some constructive criticism to the Sims team, just in case you're hate watching me and you made it this far into the video, hello, I would just like to say, I would really like to see packs given a new direction in terms of making them all about the player experience rather than justifying something being an EP's worth of content, because it's very evident that not much was done here to enhance the player experience and make it feel like a fun gameplay loop. It felt more just like a collection of different things that were coded into the game rather than a solid EP that I thought, wow, this is really fun and I'm going to go back to this over and over again. If you enjoyed this review, you might want to watch one of the other reviews plastered on the screen here. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I will see you in the next one.